All right, welcome. It's another week of Dan and Dan here at Spartan on the World Wrestling Live Show. And I'm honored to have another person who is not only in the Spartan community as a SGX coach, he is also a wrestling coach. So he understands both communities that I'm trying to talk to here. His name is Jay Jackson. He's out in Northern California, and I'm happy to welcome him on today. And again, you guys getting to know Dan, Chief of Staff here at Spartan. Jay, welcome. I'm really honored to have you come on. And Stanford alum, right?
That's right. That's right. And by the way, good morning. Very happy to be here and very honored.
Awesome. And something that we do, and I know Dan had mentioned to you earlier, is again, hopefully we'll get onto the big Spartan platform eventually here. But as for now, it's just my little tiny platform, but we get it out to as many wrestling groups as we can. We're trying to introduce this amazing OCR sport to our amazing sport, and how kids could get out there and be involved, and how it would help with, I don't know, everything. To be a wrestler is the same to be a Spartan, right? And it kind of correlates. So educating the wrestling community on how it can do. For example, I've talked to wrestling coaches before, like yourself, and they say, wow, that could be a team building day, because usually we're working out that day, but this is a workout. So we can do cardio there. We can do monkey bars as pull-ups, carrying sandbags is the military carries that you guys do, or doing rolls, and everything kind of correlates what you do. So again, that's kind of what we do. And I know he's going to ask you to kind of educate us on obviously he's more educated on this than me.
So Jay, I really want to start out though. Tell us a little bit about you and your journey to get to where you are today. I guess I'd like to hear that before we even get into the details of the other parts of obstacle course racing and stuff. Just how did you get to where you are today?
All right. Well, I'll be brief about this because it's a long story. But I had a dad who is a wrestling coach, actually a Hall of Fame wrestling coach in Washington State. And I'm from an affluent community. So things weren't very tough for kids in my area. So except for if you lived under my dad's parenting strategies. So my dad pushed my brother and sister and I pretty hard. And I won't get into the depths of that. But yeah, he wanted us to be tougher. He didn't want us to be soft. So he pushed, and he also was a Green Beret. I didn't know that until I was about in 8th grade. And one of my friends told me, and then I went home and said, Dad, Nick said you're a Green Beret. Is that true? And he's like, yeah. And that's all we talked about it for several years. So pretty humble guy, but pushed us pretty hard to where I learned how to challenge myself, and then actually when it came to teaching, I learned to challenge myself, and I was planning to go into advertising after college. So I wrestled in college, and then afterwards I stuck around as an assistant coach and was also working in an advertising firm at the same time. During that time, I had someone break into my house and pulled a gun on me, and basically tied me up, blindfolded me. And because of my dad and because of wrestling, I was able to trick him and, undo my ties and get out of that thing and beat him up a little bit. And I hope you don't.
I've heard the story. Joe told me this story. Joe told me the story when I had him on. When I interviewed him 2 years ago, he said to me, the reason I stopped teaching my kid Taekwondo and I turned him to wrestling is because I spoke to a gentleman on the West Coast that told me that he was tied at gunpoint, blah, 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 what you just said. I'll let you continue. Holy shit, that's you.
Yeah. Awesome. And Joe's going to say that I introduced him to wrestling. But the truth of the matter is, I think tough people will be attracted to tough things. And I think Joe would have found wrestling at some point. So I might've been the catalyst, but I think he would have found it. Just like at the same time, I met Joe through this kind of experience, but I was introduced to Spartan. And I think
I apologize. Tell us that story, why you got in, I cut you off during that story because I was so excited. I'm like, holy shit, I'm meeting the guy. Joe told me just about him, right? And we have fun here, right? It's cool. But yeah, tell us how, I want to like cut it and make it like a little reel and be like, oh, this guy's a badass. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. Tell us the story.
Well, it depends how much time you have. I want to keep it shorter, but I will say this: when it comes to, when it comes to that situation, my dad, one of the things he did with me and our entire wrestling team actually, is he'd have us wrestle blindfolded, just because he wanted us to have a different frame of reference. So you're going to wrestle blindfolded, see how difficult that is, and then when the blindfolds come off, it's going to be that much easier. And that was his point of the whole thing. And I will say my dad was very good at, not just challenging us, but explaining why we were doing the challenges, why we're making things difficult. And then he would coach us through those things, to the point where, like I said, you wanted more of it. So had that experience, was able to, get out of that. And again, I hope you never have it, but if you have a near-death experience, then it makes you really question your life, and what you're doing. And at the time, like I mentioned, I was in advertising, and I was thinking to myself, is that really, doing a lot for society? So I thought about it, pretty hard, and I determined, like, I should start teaching instead. That would help me, basically help other people. And basically I want to do what my dad did for me for kids. I wanted to teach them how to be tough, and why taking on challenges is something good. So that's when I went into teaching. And obviously, the wrestling coaching thing kind of goes hand in hand with this. And again, it's an amazing way to learn how to be tougher. So I can use wrestling as a vehicle to teach kids how to be tougher, and explain to them why doing this is important, and why it's going to be, something beneficial for you. So went into teaching, and then, I taught for a while, and then I basically got voluntold to be an administrator. So I was put in assistant principal role. And then I was thinking to myself, what could I say? The principal had come up to me and said, I want you to give a presentation to the staff. So, as your first day to the staff. And I was trying to think about what I was going to do, and I couldn't really think of anything. And so I turned on TV, and 60 Minute Sports had a segment on that was about, it was called Races from Hell. And it highlighted OCR, and it highlighted mostly Spartan and Joe DeSena. So I was watching this, and I was fascinated by what Joe was saying, which is it's very hard. Maybe you don't like when you're going through it, but people are going to hug you at the finish line. So I thought to myself, that would be OCR is a great model for school. School for a lot of kids is like a flatland marathon, where you're doing worksheets and tests and lecture, and it's just boring. So I thought, what I'd like to see a model of is more of an obstacle course race. You run for a bit, maybe you're learning some stuff, but then you're going to get some sort of big project, that's going to test you. You're going to make mistakes during that thing, but you got to be able to coach people through that. So I was like, this makes sense to me. I think we should run school like that. So I was coming up with this presentation. I had a little clip of Joe, talking about OCR and what it means. And I was relaying that to education. Then all of a sudden I get an email from my friend, Nick, who's the same guy, Nick Morris. He's the same guy that told me my dad was Green Beret, but I hadn't talked to Nick in about 10 years. He moved out to Connecticut, New York. And he sent me an email and said, I just met this guy named Joe DeSena at this dinner, and I told him your story, which was the story about the gunman, and he's like, he really wants to meet you. So I wrote back, that's crazy, because I just found out about this guy 2 days ago. I'm doing a presentation where he's the focus. Yeah, I want to meet him. So he flew out to Monterey, California. Joe did, and we. I met him at the race at Toro Park there in Salinas. And, he was like, I want to hear the story. And then, I said, well, what you're doing at Spartan, you can relate it to all sorts of things. You could relate to school, and I think you can make a killing talking about how what you do relates to school. He goes, yeah, I want to talk about that. But he goes, I got to answer some phone calls. Do you want to just hang out here? Do you want to check out some obstacles? He goes, do you want to run the race? And I said, well, I'll run the race if I'm here. And I'm wearing khakis and certainly not running shoes and like a long sleeve cotton shirt. And he's telling me, oh, that shirt's perfect, for when you're crawling and stuff. So and he was just blowing a bunch of smoke up my rear,
Yeah.
for sure. And you're going to want to wear pants, and, he just wanted to see me out there. So he introduced me to the hype guy at the front, and the hype guy is like, this is Jay Jackson. He's a personal friend of Joe DeSantis. He's the guy to beat in this heat. And there's like, 50 people in the pen, and they're all like shirtless, and, they're like, yeah. And it was kind of an odd experience for me. But I got in there wearing my khakis and just started running with these people. Never trained, never had an experience with Spartan before, other than watching 60 Minute Sports, which 60 Minute Sports was they were showing a sprint, which is a 3 mile Spartan race. This one we got to about the 3 mile point, and I was really hurting. And I'm looking around for the finish line, and all of a sudden there's a sign that says 10 miles to your ice cold Sierra Nevada. So I kind of look around, I turn to the guy next to me. I'm like, how long is this race? He's like, it's a beast, man. And I said, I don't know what a beast is. And he's like, well, it's 13 miles. And I was like, what? And it's a Spartan race is not, it's not a situation where you can like raise your hand and have some golf cart pick you up. You got to keep going forward. And I did more than I thought I could, because I, had to finish this thing. But the thing I loved about it, and which really solidified it for me, this introduction to Spartan, and why I still love it, is the community out there. Everyone out there was really cool to me. They could see me struggling, and then they're like, hey, come with me, I'll help you. Everyone was super positive, and that's kind of what I want when I'm teaching school, and that's kind of what I want on my wrestling team too. You want to introduce the toughness of things, but you also want that community to build. So that's my it could be longer, but that's my long story about how I got into teaching and coaching, and how I got into Spartan.
And I'm so sorry that I jumped in on your gun story, but it was like deja vu, Dan, because I that's how I met Joe. Is I was at a tournament, so the Michigan Grappler couldn't do it in Michigan going through COVID. So Tony Greathouse said, I'm going to bring it to South Carolina, wherever it was, right? So we show up. It's like the first tournament coming out of COVID. So there's masses there, and I'm standing in line, and this women wrestling coach, we start talking, and she gives me his number. She goes, oh, you should really tell this guy he's going to have his first tournament. So I call him, have him on the show. And I asked him how he got into wrestling. And the first thing he said to me was, he goes, well, it's a funny story. And I'm going to tell you about a guy, but you need to have him on your show. Here you are. And he goes through how he wanted his kids to have Taekwondo or whatever it was. And he flew some guy over from Asia and lived him in his house. And then he met you, and he went home and fired that guy and sent him back to Asia, and brought in a wrestling coach and said, okay, this is what we're doing now. Because he's like, this guy was robbed at gunpoint, was blindfolded, held his hands. I don't know, you'd have to tell the story, but it was crazy. And then just to hear it again was awesome. But man,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Sorry, I keep jumping in, because what an exciting story, and what an awesome road. And yeah, man, that's cool.
Well, and the road comes back around, because that's why Joe is in Florida right now. So he wanted his kids to have an opportunity to train with some of the best high school, people that he had known about in Lake Highland here.
Yes.
In Orlando. So, they're down here, both his kids are down here, and brought the whole family down here. So as we continue to grow the company and open up another headquarters down here in the Florida area, it's interesting to know how it comes all back to where we're talking today. So let's talk a little bit about the OCR part of it. And you said, obviously that was your first one. I would think after the first one, you probably started doing a little bit of specific training. But when you're running races, and you're looking through it as from two different lenses. So you got the SGX coach lens, and you got also the wrestling coach lens. What do you see as being some of the spots? Again, this is where the group this gets played to mostly is in the wrestling community. So as a fellow coach, for some of the coaches who might be watching this, how do you see some of the stuff that we do out there on even a sprint race or a super race, not the longer ones, but how they relate to what a coach or a wrestler goes through?
So there's a huge overlap between the two communities. First of all, wrestling and the Spartan OCR community are little tribes of people that everyone else in the world thinks is absolutely crazy, because they're putting themselves through all this difficulty and typical mindset, because our minds are programmed to avoid, pain at all costs. People are like, why would you do that? But the people that are in the wrestling community and the Spartan, SGX community understand like that this is a gift, to have this thing where you can experience these short intervals of pain that are going to balance your day out. And pain is, it's really underemphasized in life, but it's a main part of happiness, I think. So if you go to wrestling practice, or you go to an SGX practice, or training, and you go through that pain, then the rest of your day is going to feel pretty good. Like if you go to wrestling practice, you go home and your parents ask you to take out the garbage, you're like, well, that's not bad. That's a lot easier than wrestling practice. I'll do that. So it's no big thing. Homework, that's not a big deal, because, I just went through a wrestling practice. It's nice. But if you spend your day on your phone, then if your parent asks you to take out the garbage or do homework, like, oh gosh, that's super hard, because, I've been enjoying this, thing on my phone the whole time. So I think the wrestling community and the SGX community completely understand that. And you want to share it with other people. People that wrestled, or people that do SGX, they want to share that with other people. Like, come join our group, because, this is this wonderful thing. Plus, because you're going through that pain, it bonds you with other people around you. There's nothing closer than a wrestling team or an SGX community, because you immediately respect the people that are in it, because they're going through the same difficulties that you're going through. So you're like, I know what you're going through. So I can walk in an airport and see someone wearing a Spartan race shirt, and I can nod at them or have a conversation with them and be like, I get it. I get what you're going through, what you did. If I'm in that same airport and I see someone with a cauliflower ear, it's like you can have 1,000 people in a gym or an airport, wherever, and the two guys with cauliflower ears will find each other. And, it's a bond. So
It's crazy, because how many times have you heard this? Like my 13-year-old is still at the stage where he's like, this sucks, I don't want to do it. I suck at this sport, it's horrible, right? But the 16-year-old who's young is going to be a senior. He's the one he'll go to 2 practices, and then he'll go work out, and then he'll come home and we'll be like, hey, how was that? Man, it really sucked. I'm like, well, what'd you do? Man, it was hard as shit. It really sucked, but I can't wait till tomorrow. And I'm like, well, I guess that's the mindset, right?
Right. And I have 2 kids in 2 sons in high school too. And it was the same thing when they started. I started them at maybe, 8, 10 years old. And it was just 1 hour a week, wrestling. And then we also had an SGX class, at my high school, and I'd force them to go, and they would scream bloody murder. They didn't want to go. Now they're like, here's the keys, can I drive? I've researched this other, guy that can beat me up, let's go to this practice, or let's go to this SGX training. So once you get, initially you want to stay away from it, but once you get hooked in, you miss it. You miss that pain. I don't know if you had the same experience that I had, but with wrestling, if you're competing, you get that pain every day. And then when you're done competing, and if you take some time off, you miss it. You long for it. And I think a lot of older wrestlers, I'm straying from the question, Dan, I apologize. But a lot of older wrestlers are, looking for something to replace that. You can stick with masters wrestling. Few do, because it's punishing on your body. But you can also go towards something else. A lot of wrestlers go towards jiu-jitsu, which is less stress on the body. Other people will go towards Spartan racing, because, you have a purpose, you've got a race that you're heading towards, and you want to prepare for it. And you've got a reason to put yourself through that pain. So it replaces the wrestling for you.
And we can continue to do this in our later years. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good example. I'm 53 years old, and I have no plans on slowing down in running Spartan races or Tough Mudder, anything with OCR. I love anything obstacle course racing. Going to start getting into the DECA brand. It's something I hadn't gotten into yet, but I've started a little bit into the training on that. And, as much as I love going out, doing my 5 or 10 or 21K and going into barbed wire, every now and then just going into a gym and just getting those 10 stations in is enough sometimes for when the body is a little sore after a long weekend, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Again, I had some people who I ran with this past weekend in South Carolina, and they hadn't done a race in 6 weeks. You would have thought, listening to them, that it had been 2 years. They were so thrilled to be back on the course. Didn't matter that it was 105 heat index. Didn't matter that there was the sun was out just baking us for the super, so the 10K. When they got done, they're like, all right, sprints tomorrow. And they were exhausted, right? But like you say, they miss the grueling part, because while we were on the course, don't get me wrong, they were bitching the entire time we were on the course about the heat and how dry, and this with the barbed wire crawl, the ground was dry and hard. So, you're not wearing long pants when it's that hot. So you're wearing shorts, and our knees are all scraped up, and, we're hitting rocks and everything else. But man, once we crossed the finish line, we're ready for tomorrow's race already, immediately. Right.
Right. But don't you want the ground hard too? Like that's where good stories come from. It's not a good story if you're like, yeah, everything went to plan.
Yeah.
You want the difficulty. It's just like wrestling. I mean, I want the tougher guys. It's worthless if I go through a wrestling season and I had a bunch of, guys that weren't very good. That's not a good story. So you kind of
I think that's where the two intertwine, right? Again, that's why I love having conversations like this, and I love being in the community that we get to share this in, because it's easy to share what we're all talking about in the obstacle course racing community, and we share it in that community, but we're talking to people who totally get why OCR does what it does. What I love the fact is as I talk to some people who have younger kids, they want to know more about wrestling now, because I talk to them out there on the course, and I talk about what we do here, and I get asked quite often, well, did Joe really move to Florida? And I explain why Joe's in Florida, and it's family related, and we're getting the kids down here and wrestling. We have a gentleman who's got this platform that's in the wrestling community, and all of a sudden it's like just makes sense. And then I get very fortunate to meet someone like you this way, to understand you literally know how both of them come together. And again, that's also, Joe's, has tasked, Dan here with getting as many wrestlers around the entire country out to Spartan races.
For free.
Yeah.
He doesn't want me charging them. He wants me reaching out to these entire community, right?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Don't keep going. That's I know you get excited about that.
I get excited stuff but it's for free. He wants you out there, and he wants you experiencing it, and he wants it to be one big happy community, like almost like wrestling and OCR married together. I have a question. So an SGX coach would basically be like me getting my son privates at your wrestling club, right? So if I'm an OCR racer and I'm a beginner, or I'm somebody that's done a couple races, but I can't figure out how to climb the damn rope, or I can't figure out how to do the pyramid, or something that I'm having problems with, is that where the SGX coach comes in? Because I see when you sign up for a race, it says, sprint with SGX coach, or something to that extent.
So an SGX coach can do private lessons, like a wrestling coach does privates, but mostly an SGX coach is going to be like a wrestling coach, where you're going to, train a group of people all at the same time. And you are going to give those techniques and stuff. And let me just give you like a couple overlaps between coaching SGX and coaching wrestling. One is when you're doing SGX is a great way to do conditioning for wrestling, because it's functional fitness. Most of it's like wrestling, most of it's pulling. You've got rope climbs, you've got the Herc hoist, and wrestling's all pulling too. There's very little of this. And traditional weight training, you're going to get kids, especially if they're doing it on their own and they're in high school. It's like, I'm going to bench and then I'm going to sit there. and I'm going to sit there for 10 minutes and I'm going to bench again. That's not functional for wrestling or anything. The only good that's going to think about that in wrestling, like bench press, you're on your back and someone's pinning you and you're trying to push them off. You're just going to pin yourself. Like, it doesn't make sense. But all this stuff where you're the pulling, there's a lot of core stuff in SGX because it's like I said, it's functional fitness. It's you pulling yourself over things and it's you crawling under things. It makes total sense. So it's very similar. Plus there's that mental component to it that really aligns with wrestling. So when Dr. J and Joe DI, first came up with the SGX concept, it was done in, you're supposed to coach it in 3 phases or stages. The first one is to teach the technique, and the second one is you're going to add weight or effort to that technique. So you're doing it right, then you add more thing. And then the third stage of it is you're just supposed to mess with their head and try to, tell them, okay, we're going this far, but then add some more to it. So they're going to expect the unexpected, which is exactly what a wrestling coach should do. With the wrestling season, at the beginning, you should focus on technique and how to do things correctly. Then you're going to add more, live wrestling and difficulty to those things. And then at the end of the season, it should be things like, hey, we're going to wrestler 1, you're down by 4 points and there's 30 seconds left. Let's go. Okay. Or you ref a practice match and you're the referee and you mess up the calls. You give points where there should have been points to see how the people react. So that they're prepared for anything. So I think the two ways of coaching is, you're coaching the same, muscle groups, and you're also training the mind to really prepare people for, anything they're going to expect in an Spartan race, anything they can expect, or not expect in a wrestling match. And then, if you do that, then you're preparing them for life. Where if you get something thrown at you that you're not, you weren't expecting, you're going to be able to deal with that better than someone that's on their phone. So I think there's a lot of, good things that show up between these two groups.
So question for you, Jay, do you do the OS training?
Say again?
Do you offer the OS training, the obstacle specialist training? Do you participate in that?
So I don't. What we have, when after I ran that Spartan race with Joe in Monterey several years ago, the first thing I did was look up an SGX coach in the area, so I can have some expert come to the school and start teaching kids how to do this, because I thought it was very important. In particular, I wanted a situation where, and this is why, SGX and wrestling is good too, but I want a situation where kids are taking their minds off of, all their things that make them nervous and all this comparison. We have a ton of anxiety at our school because people are worried about, where they rank and are they going to get into this college and things like that. But if you're climbing over an 8-foot wall or you're wrestling in a match, you're not thinking about that stuff. You're thinking about the present moment. And I want kids in the present. So I started looking up SGX coaches, and several years ago, there weren't many. In fact, there was one in Northern California at the time, and he happened to live a few miles from our high school, and he also happened to be a graduate of our high school. So we lucked out there too. So this gentleman came in, Ty Rawlinson. He has brought in, and he was able to bring in, other coaches. So the model he had at our school was he initially, for a few years, he was coaching everything, but then the model was he's got the facility. Other coaches would come in, Christy McKiernan. We have Jorge Puga, who's that guy's incredible. He's now in Mexico City and has this incredible SGX program. But these different coaches, at a time, there'd be 5 to 7 coaches. They've got their individual classes going on. And a lot of those coaches are OS specialists. So not me, but they're definitely around.
Yeah. So again, I just want to give a quick shout out to what that is. And I think, obviously, what when we do that at some of our races, right? So again, one of the challenges I think people face is the wrestlers can run, they can lift, they can push, they can pull, they can do all of the functional fitness. But, our monkey bars at Spartan aren't the high school or the grade school, monkey bars. They're not just a half inch in diameter. you know, at Spartan, we're going to make them 2.5 inches in diameter. So you can't get your hands around them. And if you're short like me at 5'7", my arms are, you know this, in a beast, my arms are extended literally as far as I can reach to reach one bar to the next bar, but not every single one, because some of them are this close to each other. And then other ones are, you know, so that's right. You know, if a person's interested and they want to make sure that they're able to get a little understanding of what the obstacles might look like, you know, YouTube's a great place. You know, there's Ring the Bell with Jody I does a lot of the Ring the Bell videos out there. However, there's an opportunity at almost every event. It's not at every event, but almost every event. You know, a person can actually add the obstacle specialist training, get a full day with an SGX coach right at the venue on Friday before the venue or before the race happens. Get a chance to get out there and actually, well, cool thing is you get to walk the entire course too. So you get an idea of some of the terrain you're going to come up into, or maybe be surprised with some of them, because some of it will catch you off guard if you don't, you know, you look at a map and it doesn't tell you that, by the way, this really next 1 mile walk is actually in a creek the entire way. That has where you can't see the floor of the creek, and it's all rock bed. That's all different rock all the way through it, right? So it's kind of a cool thing to do. So I did want to give a shout out there, you know, since we have an SGX coach on there. SGX coaches across our country, actually across the world, offer some of this OS training, obstacle specialist training, because it's a great way, one, to get to meet a coach. And every coach has some story of how they got to where they're at. You don't just accidentally become an SGX coach. There's a reason why that you do it, whether it's part of the business or part of what you're doing with your wrestling training and helping out there. So just a quick shout out to those folks on that. So are you still racing Spartan races on a regular basis?
Not as regular anymore. So just to add to my story, 4 years ago, I had a stroke, where my entire right side was paralyzed. And it took several months. It took several months to get all that back. So that's been a struggle. But like I said, thank goodness for wrestling, and thanks goodness for Spartan, because, you know, here's something unexpected that hit. You know, am I going to sit and you know, am I going to sit and, you know, pout about it and, you know, talk about why me, or am I going to go and attack this thing? So, you know, I'm glad I had the background that I did, because I was ready to go, and attack this thing. So I got it all back. And that was an interesting experience, because initially when I was running, you know, before 4 years ago, you know, I was training pretty hard in Spartan, and, you know, everything was super easy for me. You know, the running was easy, the, you know, monkey bars, climbing ropes, all easy. And it was just, and then all of a sudden I had to start, you know, basically from stage one again. And I knew I could do the stuff, but I had to work at it. So it was interesting, you know, technique wise. I really had to focus more on technique so I could start getting over things. So I've done maybe four races since then. I had a year and a half where I couldn't race. But then, you know, the fun part for me is, like I said, I've got two sons, 14 and 16, and I want them to do it. And so actually my 14-year-old, he's a wrestler, and he's like you and me. He's very small for his age. So they didn't believe he was 14, you know, so it took some explaining. Next time I'm going to bring his birth certificate. But we did the stadium run at San Francisco. My older son and I, you know, did a sprint. So I'm able to run these things with my boys now. And I'm not as fast as I was, but I'm getting back.
Nice.
And that's a goal. That's a goal for me. So yeah, that's where I sit.
So what you're saying, Jay, is you've overcome nothing in your life, and it's all been just handed right to you. See, no.
Well, if you take all these big events in my life and stick them in one podcast, it sounds like I'm overcoming a bunch. But to be honest, my life has bin pretty good. And again, you know, very happy. And I'm saying my life is good because we all have challenges, right? You know, it's how you deal with those challenges. And if you're a wrestler, or if you're, you know, doing Spartan, or if you find some other way to, push yourself, challenge yourself, then I really think you're going to have a happier life, dealing with things. Plus, like I said earlier, if I put myself through even a half hour of short, intense pain, the rest of my day is awesome. I don't mind mowing the lawn because, it's, at least I'm not in the throes of something incredibly hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So
That's awesome. I mean, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sorry I cut you off in that amazing story at the beginning, but
No.
it was incredible because I heard it before and I was like, oh shit, that's the dude.
I will say, and maybe I'll share the story with you later, but I will say Joe tends to blow things up bigger than they are. It was
Well, I
interesting.
mean, I walk into my house, I'm robbed at gunpoint, I'm blindfolded and my hands are behind my back. Because of my wrestling, I got out of it. That's pretty, I don't know how much.
I mean, Joe might have had you body slamming the guy off the roof later on in the story, but that's beside the point.
You came out like Rambo and you put the thing on and you were like,
So,
Yeah.
hey, well, I tell you what, Jay, thank you so much for your time, man. I look forward to getting out to California at some point and getting a chance to meet you. We'll have to stay connected. I don't make it out to as many races on the West Coast as I obviously living over here in Florida. I do a lot of the East Coast over to Texas, but we'll have to get connected sometime out that way when I can get out there early next year.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you,
Fantastic.
I don't know if your wrestling team travels, if you take them out to, like, we just were in North Dakota with Team Florida for Fargo. My son got to experience that for the first time and we're going, I believe we're going to Michigan Grappler in Michigan. So I don't know, do you guys get out of California and tend to get to some of these national tournaments?
We're getting to that point.
Nice.
So I just started coaching 2 years ago, and if I'm going to do something, I'm in. So we're building to that. How'd your son do at Fargo?
He went 2-2.
Hey, that's awesome.
Isn't 2 wins?
That's
I mean, I know that going out there, he was a little nervous. He didn't know if he really had what it took to get 1 win. But he's been training really hard and he got 2 wins. And the one that his second loss, it was 8-8 with 26 seconds left in the first period. And he went, he'll probably tell me I'm stupid. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it looked like he went for a shot and he got the leg,
Yeah.
but he couldn't get for some reason, his head got stuck. So he couldn't pop it out. So the guy cradled him. And obviously in freestyle, what I'm learning is you don't have time to fight to get out of the cradle because as soon as your shoulders touch, you're tapped, right? Because freestyle is tapped like this. Yeah. So I mean, I got to say, I think the guy was a state runner-up in Kansas. And he wrestled him hard in that first period. And I was proud of him, to walk away with 2. When I looked up at my wife, she was crying because we really didn't know what to expect. But to see, I tell people, in 10th grade, he went 0-2 at districts. 12 months later, in 11th grade, he won districts, won regions, and placed at states. And then we got to go to Fargo and he got a couple wins there. So he's progressing, right? And, we're getting there. We're learning. He knows he's got a long way to go to reach his goals. We will have an announcement of the college that he chose here shortly. So we're making progress and he'll get there, but he knows he's got a long way to go.
See, and all those things are fantastic. It's just like getting a podium in Spartan, or and wins are fantastic and things like that. But the truth of all this, why we're doing all this stuff, is to make you a better person. Like if you sit back and look at your careers in OCR or wrestling, and you really think about it, it's about the relationships you made with other people. It's about the things you learned. It's about, joy, enjoyment, and happiness and things like that. It's hard to tell a high school kid that because you're so focused on the wins and losses, but gosh, it's just these 2 things, these 2 areas that I am, super biased about, but they challenge you. They push you, but there's nothing better. I'm with both of you. I totally get it.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I say, you may hate me now, but years from now, you're going to love me for pushing you. So it's been a good relationship. But yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming on. I hope we get to run into each other in one of these worlds. And thanks for reaching out and coming on. It really awesome to meet you.
Sounds
Absolutely.
fantastic.
All right. Appreciate it, Jay.
You have a
Thank you,
great day.
guys.
Yes, sir.
You too.